How many instances must God strip away something precious from my life before he feels content? Perhaps God never existed from the outset. My name is Nancy Margaret, and after completing junior college, I worked as a bank employee. Orphaned at a young age, I've been residing with my soul sister, Emma. The common belief is that the older sister is more stable, but Emma, despite being older, always outshone me in beauty and strength. "You are beautiful, so you should pay more attention to your appearance," Emma would affectionately chide me. "Don't worry about me. Look, Mary is calling you." On a peaceful Saturday afternoon, while in the park with Emma, her daughter Mary waved at us from a distance. Amidst laughter, Emma sprinted toward Mary, cautioning her not to touch pill bugs. Emma, employed in the apparel industry, had married a colleague. Saturdays became a ritual for me and Mary to spend time in the park after Emma's husband left for work. Mary's birthday was approaching, and Emma asked if I could join them the following Saturday. Apologizing for disrupting my day off, Emma insisted we always spend time together. She mentioned having someone to introduce to me. I replied with a smile, "Of course, Emma. Nancy over here." Mary, taking my hand, led me to the sandbox. It was a tranquil and meaningful day off, and I believed these days would continue indefinitely. However, the routine shattered the following weekend, a week before Mary's birthday. I received a call and rushed to the hospital. Emma and her husband Walter were already lifeless, a white towel covering their faces. The time of death was 3:05 p.m., and the cause was explained by the doctor, but the words were inaudible. All I knew was that Mary's parents were no longer with us. Emma and Walter had taken a day off to buy a birthday present for Mary and a gift for me. A truck, driven by a dozing driver, collided with their car on the way home. Struggling to comprehend, I heard a faint voice nearby. Mary, with her favorite stuffed animal, stood there asking, "Mom and Dad, why don't they wake up? I've been calling to them, but they've been asleep." Mary's lips were pale blue as she anxiously mumbled. I could only stand there, holding her small hand. The funeral, attended only by relatives, was held quietly. The news of the young couple's death left everyone in shock, and silence prevailed throughout the somber ceremony. Emma and Walter had lost their parents early, making me the closest relative. Without hesitation, I offered to care for Mary. A collective sigh of relief seemed to permeate the air as my relatives appeared to anticipate my response. It was as if they expected me to affirm that children at this age are particularly sensitive to various aspects of life. Having lost both my parents at a tender age, I was acutely aware of this sensitivity. I was relieved that the decision had been reached before the discussion had even begun. Crouching down to make eye contact with Mary, I gently explained, "Mary, your mom and dad are going to sleep for a while. It's just for a little while, and you won't be able to talk to them for some time. But I will always be by your side during that time." Mary, dressed inappropriately in black for a child of her age, clutched a stuffed animal as she gave a small nod. Subsequently, we received belongings from the police, including a set of Mary's favorite character toys found in Emma and Walter's car. Additionally, there was a small white box from a well-known cosmetics brand. Upon opening it, I discovered vividly colored lipstick, a choice I would never have made for myself. In my imagination, I could almost hear Emma saying, "You are so pretty, you should be more confident." After ensuring Mary went to bed that night, I ventured outdoors and let out a heartfelt cry. The tears flowed ceaselessly. Mary, initially awkward after coming to live with me, gradually became more at ease, laughing more often. Despite her intelligence and independence, the shock of losing her parents lingered. Occasionally, she would cry in the middle of the night or evening, and all I could do was hold her until she calmed down. Adapting to a new daycare center and the rapidly changing environment, Mary's occasional distress deepened my resolve to support her. Lacking experience in marriage and child-rearing, it was challenging to balance work with raising a young child. I informed my supervisor of my situation, and despite the offer to reduce my workload, I declined, unwilling to cause further disruption in an already overworked office. After picking up Mary from daycare, we returned home hand in hand. "Mary, shall we make curry today?" I suggested, and her face lit up with a smile. At that moment, the exhaustion from work dissipated as I found solace in the joy of being with her. Caught between the welling love in my heart and the lingering sorrow of losing Emma, I endeavored to maintain my mental and physical well-being. However, this delicate balance was disrupted during a rainy day in the season, approximately half a year after I had moved in with Mary. "Are you all right, Nancy? You look very pale," a concerned colleague called out to me. I abruptly shifted my attention back to the documents in my hand. "I'm fine, just a bit distracted," I replied with a forced smile, hastily checking the documents before returning to the computer. Since the morning, a heaviness had settled in my mind, hindering my productivity. Despite feeling unwell, I couldn't afford to cause any disruptions during the hectic season. As the time for picking up Mary approached, I hurriedly gathered my belongings, convincing myself that the uneasiness was merely in my head. Arriving at the childcare center a little late, the teacher pointed out my pallor. Unaware of how pale I looked, I considered going to the hospital after completing my responsibilities. Smiling at Mary, who hugged me and held my hand, we walked home discussing trivial matters amid the heavy rain. Approaching a pedestrian crossing, I noticed a truck headed toward us. Swiftly pulling Mary's hand, she fell on her bottom due to the force. Terrified, I clutched her in my arms, realizing the gravity of the situation. The truck had stopped normally, but the people around stared at me suspiciously. Mary, worriedly peeking at me, whispered my name as I regained consciousness. Lying in a hospital bed, I heard a soft female voice urging me to lie down. The clock indicated around 10 p.m., and I wondered how long I had been asleep. As the nurse attended to the IV, I glanced at Mary, asleep at my feet with traces of tears on her cheeks. Overwhelmed by guilt, I was about to be crushed when a knock interrupted my thoughts. "Excuse me," a young doctor entered, advising me to stay lying down. "You've collapsed, probably due to overwork and high fever. While I don't believe a thorough examination is necessary, would you like to schedule another?" I politely declined the detailed examination, citing the multitude of thoughts occupying my mind. The doctor informed me that they were still administering an IV, and presented the option of staying at the hospital overnight or returning home. Observing a hint of concern in the doctor's eyes, I hesitated momentarily. At that instant, I noticed Mary stirring at my feet. "Mary!" I called out, and she jumped up, seemingly surprised. Despite appearing a bit sleepy, she looked at me and spoke clearly. "I'm sorry I surprised you, Mary. It's all right." My head was still throbbing, but I smiled, hoping to ease her worries. Mary, seemingly on the verge of tears, hugged my feet and nuzzled her face. I marveled at how such a young girl could care about me, my heart heavy with apology. Suddenly, the doctor spoke up, addressing Mary. "Are you Mary?" She looked up at the voice and stared at him before recognizing him. "Oh, it's you, Joseph." Subsequently, I learned the story from Joseph, who turned out to be a neighbor from my sister's former apartment. The hospital was a local general clinic where Joseph worked as a doctor. Mary had always greeted him warmly, and he had dinners at Emma's house with her and Walter. Overwhelmed with emotions upon hearing Emma and her family's story, I ensured Mary had dozed off again before confiding in Joseph about our current situation. Concerned about my health, Joseph strongly recommended that I stay in the hospital overnight, a recommendation I followed. Glancing at Mary sleeping peacefully in the bed Joseph had prepared, I felt a twinge in the back of my nose as I looked at her innocent face. Determined to protect her at all costs, I made a silent promise to myself. The next morning, I called the office and was granted the rest of the week off. Though my fever had subsided, I chose to spend the day at home with Mary after being released from the hospital. The following day, with Mary eagerly anticipating a daycare field trip, I packed her lunch and saw her off. Planning to relax and prepare for the next week, I decided to go out briefly to change things up. I headed to the park, a place where Emma, Mary, and I used to spend our weekdays. The deserted park presented a stark contrast to the lively atmosphere of our Saturday visits. Seating myself on the bench where Emma and I would sit, I stared blankly at the playground equipment. Memories of Mary joyfully swinging and Emma pushing her flooding my mind. Uncontrollable tears welled up, and I instinctively reached for my sleeve to wipe them away. "Nancy," a familiar voice startled me, and I turned to find Joseph standing there in plain clothes. He explained that he lived nearby and often came to the park on his days off. I was too surprised to respond, but he offered me a plastic bottle he was holding. Grateful, I accepted it and moved to the far end of the bench to make room for him. "Do you come here often?" he inquired, and I began to share my memories, mentioning how Emma, Mary, and I frequented the park. Despite hardly knowing Joseph, our conversation flowed naturally. It seemed that because he knew Emma and Mary well, we had much to discuss. Unusually exhausted both mentally and physically, I found myself opening up to Joseph, sharing not just about Emma and Mary, but also about myself. I noticed his gaze, a mix of complex emotions, as I apologized for burdening him with my concerns. "No, I'm rather glad you told me about it," he reassured me. Joseph then looked at me seriously, taking a slight inhale as if gathering his nerves. "If you don't mind, will you allow me to support Mary?" My eyes widened at his unexpected proposal. I assured him that I wouldn't do anything to inconvenience him or Mary. He explained that Emma and Walter had treated him well, and he loved Mary. Wanting to help her had always been his desire. I was touched by Joseph's sincerity and nodded in agreement. The park, once a place of shared memories with Emma and Mary, became a setting for a new connection and a potential source of support for Mary's well-being. Joseph's expression revealed his deep care for Mary, my sister, and her husband. Although I couldn't respond immediately, Joseph kindly shared his contact information, suggesting a potential meeting at the park the following Saturday. His shy smile and consideration for my feelings stirred something in me, and I felt a flutter in my heart. We shook hands, and I bid farewell to Joseph. Upon picking up Mary from daycare, her eyes lit up upon hearing that I had met Joseph. I proposed the idea of spending time with him, and Mary eagerly agreed. On the appointed day when Mary spotted Joseph, she ran to him excitedly. Joseph, employing the playfulness of an adult, engaged with Mary energetically. I surmised that he must have played with her like this before, and I felt a twinge of shame for doubting him initially. Joseph, a gentleman from the start, never visited my house. Instead, we enjoyed activities in the park, dined out, and went on picnics, with Joseph often preparing lunches. His caring nature toward both Mary and me naturally drew me closer to him. We gradually became more intimate, and before I realized it, we were sharing dinners at home. One day we all visited an amusement park together. In the evening, Mary happily walked between Joseph and me, holding our hands. Unexpectedly, Mary suggested that Joseph stay over at our house after dinner. Caught off guard, I could barely respond, as Joseph typically returned home after dinner. Mary, expressing her wish for all of us to sleep together, murmured sadly. After a brief pause, Joseph knelt in front of Mary, his gaze fixed on her. He asked, "Mary, do you love Nancy?" Mary responded happily, "Yeah, I love her." Joseph then declared, "Okay, I love her too." His sudden declaration caught me off guard. Joseph expressed his concern about not wanting me to hate him, and proposed having dinner that day, with the possibility of staying over next time if I agreed. Relieved, I agreed, and in the dusk, they couldn't see how much I blushed. Mary's direct remarks stirred something within me, and when she asked if Joseph would be friends with me forever and ever, he stood up, looking mischievous yet serious. "I want us to be friends forever and ever, Nancy. Will you be good friends with me?" Mary's innocent words left me wanting to be a part of this newfound bond, and I nodded in agreement. I struggled to muster a response, managing only a hesitant yes. Mary joyfully darted around at our feet. It was then that she shared Emma's intention to introduce me to Joseph. She remarked, "There's someone I'd like to introduce you to," referring to Joseph. Mary's statement caught me off guard, and she confidently declared, "I knew you three were destined to be together." Mary's playful and teasing tone evoked memories of Emma. I couldn't shake the feeling that my connection with Joseph was a special gift from Emma. While the sorrow of losing them remains indelible, I am determined to gaze forward and dedicate myself to ensuring Mary's happiness. This, I believe, is the most effective way to bring peace to Emma and Andre. I envision a future encounter with Emma, where she will radiate happiness. On that day, I aspire to share with her the story of Mary's life, filled with vibrant and cheerful smiles.